Hello BookTube and hello AuthorTube. I wanted to do a quick update on NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, which started yesterday. And this is, for those of you who maybe don't know, this is a worldwide madcap endeavor to write 50,000 words of the first draft of a novel in the month of November. 1,667 words a day. Only way it can be done is if you don't edit while you're writing, which is one of the main goals of NaNoWriMo, to teach you not to edit while you're writing. It also wants to teach you that writing a first draft is not writing a finished book, which is, first cousin to don't edit while you write. The idea that you want to generate the draft of a book. That's all. It doesn't have to be a finished book, doesn't have to be the greatest thing you've ever written. It just has to be the draft of a book. And I agonized. I was feeling under the weather for the end of October, and I agonized over that. I didn't make nearly as many videos on the subject as I wanted to. I didn't do a Steve stream on the subject. And now NaNoWriMo has started, and I started with it. I started late. Ordinarily, I start on the stroke of midnight on the 1st of November. But I wasn't feeling up to it, so I waited until the day of November 1st, yesterday, to embark on my project. The Destruction of the Veilti, a science fiction novel, because I'm a co-host for a nonfiction for New Worlds November, that is about a scientist in the future, in the near future, who becomes obsessed with a godlike race of aliens and wants to understand them, and gradually over the course of the novel, his desire to understand them will become a desire to destroy them. By slow psychological steps, he will get from the one to the other. And one of the deeper points that I wanted to make in the story is that the two are very connected, always, in all cases. I had misgivings about it, as I think I mentioned on this channel, because the very story that I'm choosing to tell would mean I would be locked into writing a psychological drama of mental degeneration, and that gets wearying. I wasn't sure that I wanted to write such a thing, no matter how much science fiction I threw in. I need to build the spacefaring society. I need to build human society as it will be in that future age. And I need to build my alien beings and my scientists. I need to do all of that. But at the heart of the story is going to be my scientists degenerating. And I was wondering, in the merciless second week of NaNoWriMo, will that really tell on you? Will you not want to do that anymore? I had little misgivings about that, but I blocked it all out anyway, and I started it, and I set up my project on NaNoWriMo's website. And I wrote my first 2,000 words. And I was all set to do that again today when I sort of realized, I think I'm right, I sort of realized that it's not that I shy away from writing the mental degeneration of my main character. That's a grim story. It's not a fun story. It's a grim story. It's not that I'm shying away from that. I have written that kind of thing before. It's that I wanted to write one of my other projects more. And I decided against it for all sorts of made-up reasons, for all sorts of silly made-up reasons. One of my other projects is The Winding of the Way. And it gets its ultimate genesis. It's not the same thing, but it gets its ultimate genesis from Autumn Amour, a reading event by the Bookish Bryants. I'm not trying to blame them here, but nevertheless, during Autumn Amour, I read a lot of romance, including a lot of self-published romance, and a lot of you sent me stuff, and I followed. I went down a lot of romance rabbit holes, and one of them was tentacle romance, where for one reason or another, usually it's just one reason, the main character in tentacle romance is the object of passionate amour, or more, or less, of a non-human lover, of a being that is mostly tentacles. One way or another, I read a lot of tentacle fiction, probably as much of it as there is to read. And I saw a ton of variety, a ton of variations on that theme. And I liked a lot of it. Unironically, liked a lot of it. But I kept thinking, okay, but this is all being done for a market, and the market is what my generation used to refer to as one-handed reading. The market is very much for surface titillation. let's just say. I'm trying to keep this PG while talking about something that very much is not. All the time that I was reading those things, I was thinking, all right, well, you're going to get around to that element because you're writing that kind of a story. But I was impressed a lot of the times by a lot of the creativity that was going on elsewhere in the stories, other than that one element. A lot of these authors were putting a lot of heart into these stories, characters, and also world building. But the stories ended up being window dressing for that one element, that one, what are you going to do with the tentacle element? And the more of it I read, the more I thought, and I actually said to one of you, I made a quip, that what's missing here is the war and peace of tentacle literature. Someone who writes a tentacle story and pulls out all the stops, so to speak. A tentacle story that has that element, the one element that I'm not talking about, but it has all the other elements too. Just an epic tentacle romance thing. Maybe even not romance, just an epic encounter, tentacle encounter story. And the minute I started thinking of that, a book called The Winding of the Way started filling out in my mind. All sorts of things started filling out in my mind. The world building that is an essential part of any science fiction was bursting up all over when it came to that story. Whereas I was dragging the world building out of the destruction of the Veyanti. I was thinking, all right, well, now I have to think of how do these individual spacefaring vessels work? What's their power source? Now, okay, I got that done. That's all blocked away. Now I have to think up, what's this new society? What's happened in the last 200 years? What do people think? What do they do? See what I mean? I had to. I felt, now I have to do this. Here's a bunch of homework assignments that I have to do before I can start writing the story, which in itself is something that I'm not enthused to write. The mental destruction of a character. It's in itself something that doesn't enthuse me. Whereas the story that I want to tell in The Winding of the Way was there right from the beginning, and the world building was just doing itself. I'm sure that some of you have felt this. The difference between involuntary creation and voluntary creation, this is a pure example of that. So I'm going to do what I advise people not to do. I'm going to do what you absolutely shouldn't do. I'm going to change my project on day 2 of NaNoWriMo. I'm going to either take down or mark as unfinished the destruction of the Veyanti and put up The Winding of the Way and write 2 chapters. I break down NaNoWriMo not into 1,667 words a day, but into 1,700 words a day because I'm better with round numbers, that's all. And I make each 1,700 word installment a chapter. So instead of writing 1 chapter yesterday of my book and then 1 chapter today, I'm going to do 2 chapters of The Winding of the Way today. And honestly, I don't think it's going to be a trouble. I think it's going to be one of those NaNoWriMo projects where I really want to keep going at the end of the day's writing. I can't do that. I don't know what the rest of you are like, but I have lots of writing obligations. I can't do that. When I reach the word count for the day on NaNoWriMo, I make myself stop. Because as fun as it is, I've got other things to do. But I'm going to do that today. I'm going to change my project today. And my rationale, I don't think anybody cares about this, but it's a Nano update. People make them. I originally talked myself out of doing this story because it is born out of pornography, right? I'm calling it tentacle romance, but it's often called tentacle porn. And that's an very active element of it. And it would be, in some way, an element in any version that I would do. It wouldn't be the focal point the way it is in all the stuff that I read, but it would still be there. It would have to be. I would have too much respect for the etiology of the whole thing to change that. I thought Nano probably frowns on that. Nano wants you to write a 50,000 word draft of something that has commercial potential, and this wouldn't. But hasn't the world grown up around NaNoWriMo? Don't people self-publish things all the time now, whether it has commercial potential or not? And don't they sometimes find an audience, sometimes even a big audience, for stuff that the original conception of NaNoWriMo would have discouraged you from doing? There was that. I talked myself out for that reason, and also because I wasn't sure that I could do it. I've been mocking explicitly any kind of explicit literature for a long time. This wouldn't be. The Winding of the Way will not have that much of that element in it. And then another thing I noticed when I went on the NaNoWriMo website that I could swear has never been there before. When I was setting up the destruction of the Veyanti, one of the little boxes for setting up the project was, how would you describe this project? And the drop-down menu included memoir, it included nonfiction. I had no idea. I'm going to have to dig into that and find out. NaNoWriMo, the novel is right there in the title of the thing. I was assuming you couldn't write nonfiction for NaNoWriMo. And I could swear that another thing on that list was pastiche or fan fiction. I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. If you can write fan fiction for NaNoWriMo, then I'm off to the races. Not this year. I don't think I can start a third project. But Camp NaNoWriMo and NaNoWriMo next year, I'm off to the races. All I want to do is write fan fiction at this point. But anyway, that's my Nano update. I am switching projects. So if you go over to my page, you will see that the Destruction of the Vayanti is now inactive. And I have started The Winding of the Way. More science fiction. I'm still sticking to New Worlds November, but it's a different project. And of course, I'm curious to know how your own Nano experience is going. Feel free to tell me. If yours is off to a disastrous start, then we are on the same boat. So feel free to let me know. But anyway, that's your update. I will give you more updates, and we'll do a Steve stream about writing soon. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.